small island in San Francisco Bay would hardly be known even to people living nearby if not for the world's most famous prison, Alcatraz. According to the official version, no one has ever escaped from here in its entire history. But that's the official version. In reality, things aren't that simple. In mid-2022, U.S. authorities released sketches of 3 elderly men, presumably. This is what the escapees from the impenetrable Alcatraz look like more than half a century later. Back then, 3 inmates devised a virtuoso plan. They quietly left their cells, the prison building, and finally the island it stood on. No one has seen them since. Or almost no one. For 60 years, clues and witnesses have surfaced, claiming to have spotted the inmates either in the US or in South America. For 60 years, US authorities have been searching for the fugitives. Yet they've never been found, neither alive nor dead. The case remains open. This is an incredibly gripping story. I'll tell you in detail how 3 inmates escaped from one of the most heavily guarded prisons using spoons, raincoats, and an accordion. And most importantly, where the fugitives disappeared to. This is the story of the Alcatraz escape. Okay, I'm sure most of you have seen The Shawshank Redemption, the story of a legendary escape. And by the way, it's the most popular movie in cinema history according to viewers. But that's not the point. The point is that the story is fiction. Stephen King came up with the novella, and later a screenplay was written based on it. The characters are fictional. Any resemblance to reality is coincidental. Now imagine something like that happening for real. Only instead of 1 person escaping, 3 did it, and not from anywhere but from Alcatraz, one of history's most impenetrable prisons. And the main mystery of the escape remains unsolved for over half a century. I'll break down this story in as much detail as possible. And we'll start with this episode. June 12, 1962. That day at the federal maximum security prison Alcatraz was supposed to start routinely. At 7 a.m., guards make their rounds of the cells. By then, every inmate must be awake and standing by the bars to greet the checking officer. But that morning, in one of the cells, the inmate was still lying in bed, tightly wrapped in a blanket. The passing guard prods his head with a billy club through the bars, but there's no reaction. "I think he's dead," the officer says. His colleagues push the head harder. At that moment, the head falls to the cell floor. The guards quickly realize the head on the floor is just a dummy. Under the blanket, instead of a body, there are rolled-up sheets and clothes. The prison authorities will find a similar scene in 2 more cells. From there, it's the standard script. Alarm, siren sounds, and the start of a search operation that will become unprecedented for America. Not surprisingly, 3 inmates pulled off a successful escape from Alcatraz, the prison from which escape is impossible. This story began about a year before the actual escape, in 1961. Alan West was an experienced thief and car thief. True, he ended up in Alcatraz for a different reason. The inmate had escaped from other prisons several times and earned a transfer to the legendary correctional facility, nicknamed the Rock by inmates. For several years in Alcatraz, West behaved well and earned the honorable privilege of painting the ceiling in the very building where his cell was. Work on the Rock was a reward, not a punishment, but more on that later. During one of his shifts, West notices a vent opening on the ceiling, covered by a grate. It leads straight to the building's roof. That's when the escape plan is born in Alan's head. To pull off this ambitious idea, he needs a team. The best candidate is an inmate named Frank Morris. By then, he had pulled off not 1, not 2, but a full 11 escapes from prison, all by age 30. As they say, what you've achieved, Morris, that's what. He was first arrested at 14. Then came armed robberies, car thefts, burglaries, and break-ins. Prisons followed, from which Frank managed to escape, largely thanks to his high intellect. His file listed an IQ of 133, placing Morris in the elite club of the planet's smartest people. Scores like that or higher are only in 2% of the population. Alcatraz was the logical end to such a biography. He definitely won't escape from here, the prison authorities thought. The other two escapees are brothers John and Clarence Anglin. They weren't distinguished by high intellectual abilities, but they also ended up in Alcatraz after escaping from other prisons. The team is assembled, but the participants' cells are in different parts of the building. To coordinate their actions effectively, they need to be next to each other. A few months of good behavior and diligent work prove sufficient. The future fugitives are moved to adjacent cells. Here's an important point. Cells in Alcatraz were single occupancy, small and cramped. But single occupancy, that's what favorably set the facility apart from other prisons. You could sleep peacefully without fear for your life. So Alan West, Frank Morris, and the Anglin brothers get neighboring cells. This happens in September 1961. That's when the inmates begin preparing the escape. Stage 1, the plan. Though we should pause here. The inmates knew full well where they were. But I'm sure not all of you have that info. So Stage 0, background. In 1775, a Spanish explorer discovered San Francisco Bay and, among other things, a small piece of land in the middle of it. The explorer named it La Isla de los Alcatraces, or Island of the Pelicans. The island's main inhabitants back then were birds. The inmates, arrived in the mid-19th century during the gold rush. U.S. authorities built a fortress and lighthouse on the rocky island. 10 years later, the Civil War broke out in the States, and Alcatraz became a holding place for POWs. But the island gained true fame only in 1934. By then, the buildings had been rebuilt into a federal prison with maximum security measures and minimal escape probability. Alcatraz's main task became housing the most dangerous criminals, those accused of murders and those who had escaped or broken rules in other correctional facilities. If you don't follow society's laws, you go to prison. If you don't follow prison laws, you go to Alcatraz. In the 1930s, Alcatraz's main residents were gangsters first and foremost. The most famous inmate of that era was Al Capone. It was in the 30s that the Rock's harshest rules applied. For example, an almost total ban on inmates talking to each other. If in other prisons Al Capone could negotiate fairly comfortable conditions, in Alcatraz he got a tiny single cell and strict discipline like everyone else. Violations led to punishments like a total ban on leaving your tiny cell. Some inmates reported beatings, though prison authorities naturally denied it. By the 1960s, gangsters were no longer a societal problem, and conditions at Alcatraz softened. But security measures, on the contrary, remained reliable and were even modernized. First off, the prison was on an island. To the nearest land, about 1.5 miles of cold San Francisco Bay waters. You could try swimming, but it would likely end in severe hypothermia, and the person would simply drown. Though you might not get that far. The bay is full of sharks. Crossing by boat is possible, but where to get one? Non-official vessels were forbidden from approaching Alcatraz closer than 200 meters. The entire island perimeter had barbed wire fences and several sniper towers. Though most likely none of that mattered, since getting out of the main building where inmates were held was practically impossible. The number of inmates on the island was always small, about a couple hundred. There was one guard for every 3 of them. That's the best ratio compared to other U.S. prisons. Staff made multiple head counts daily. Cells were on 3 floors facing each other, so guards could better see what was happening behind the bars from both sides. In the center were rooms with armed staff. From there, they could potentially shoot through the entire inner space. The main building also had metal detectors and canisters of irritant gas in case of a riot. And the main proof of Alcatraz's impregnability was 14 escape attempts, all of which failed. Or rather, all except the one this video is about. So, Alan West, Frank Morris, and the Anglin brothers begin escape preparations in September 1961. The accomplices need to solve 4 problems. How to get out of the cell, how to leave the prison building, how to get down to the water unnoticed, and how to reach the mainland. Problem 1, the cell. Sawing through the sturdy bars is not just useless but pointless. you'd be met by a large number of armed guards. The other option is to tunnel through the wall. Under the sinks in the cells was a vent. Behind it, a passage leading to a narrow corridor with pipes and utilities. Bad news. The vent passage is narrow enough that a person might not fit. Good news. The cement around the perimeter wasn't very strong, and the accomplices decide they can try breaking it down. The fugitives steal spoons from the dining hall, sharpen them so the ends are pointed, and methodically chip away at the wall around the vent opening. They work in shifts. 2 watch the guards walking the corridor, while the other 2 scrape cement in their cells with the spoons. The hero of the Shawshank Redemption took decades to make a hole in his cell. Alcatraz inmates were much luckier. It took 6 months. In that time, they gained access to the utility corridor behind the cells. The first accomplice to do it is Clarence Anglin. Through the pipe corridor, he crawls to the top of the building, to the coveted vent. Freedom seems so close. But at that moment, Anglin realizes the vent isn't just barred. The grate is bolted down tight with large bolts. The fugitives decide to saw through those bolts. But easier said than done. First, guards would quickly notice empty cells. Second, the accomplices working on the bolts could easily be seen and heard. In Frank Morris's file, who had successfully escaped from many prisons, the phrase "escape artist" appeared. And in the case of the Alcatraz escape, the accomplices can boldly be called artists, and their actions a masterpiece. Here's what I mean first and foremost. To keep guards from noticing the empty cells while they sawed the bolts under the roof, the inmates made dummy heads. Anything they could scrounge during work went into it. Scraps of fabric, paper, soap, wire, cement, and glue. That's how the fugitives crafted the fake heads. For realism, 2 things were missing: paint and hair. Inmates at Alcatraz had not just duties but rights, including the right to hobbies. So the accomplices request paint from the administration under the pretext of painting portraits of loved ones. The material, of course, goes to painting the fake heads. The cherry on top is the hair. Clarence Anglin worked in the prison barbershop, where he manages to get hair that the fugitives glue onto the dummies. Inmates tuck clothes and sheets under the blanket, top it with the head, and it creates a very realistic picture of a sleeping person. If you don't get too close or touch it, spotting the switch is nearly impossible. Another key issue the fugitives solve successfully: the cell walls. To keep guards from noticing the missing chunk under the sink, the inmates made a cardboard wall mock-up and painted it to match the shade. The empty cell problem is solved. Next stage: cutting the vent bolts. As you've figured out, one main reason for the operation's success was inmate labor assignments. For bad behavior, you could be locked in solitary for a long time. Alan West, for example, was painting the ceiling in the space above the upper-level cells. From the painting, debris piled up in the ceiling space. West decides to sweep some down. Due to the building's design, the debris falls straight down into the main walkway, dubbed Broadway. And the shine of the floor on that Broadway was a point of pride for prison management. On the guards' complaints, West shrugs. Painting's a dirty job after all. Alan immediately suggests a fix. Just curtain off the ceiling space with fabric scraps. Then Broadway stays clean. The guards agree. Alan West and the accomplices get what they want. Now no one can see their bolt-cutting work, though they could still be heard, and quietly is tough. And it's worth reminding again that Alcatraz's reputation was far scarier than the actual conditions. First, inmates were well-fed to prevent hunger riots. But even more interesting is the musical hour tradition. Almost every day from 5:30 to 7 p.m., inmates could play instruments or listen to the radio from their cells. Take Al Capone playing the banjo, he was pretty good, they say. Music sounds are perfect cover for the fugitives' work. In shifts, they crawl to the vent and gradually saw through the massive bolts. Takes 3 months. The accomplices even make soap bolt dummies just in case, so guards notice nothing. In that small ceiling space, now tightly curtained with rags, the fugitives set up a real workshop. The final prep stage, the boat. That's how the inmates plan to cross San Francisco Bay and reach the mainland. According to one version, Frank Morris, the one with the high IQ, loved reading popular mechanics in his cell. There, he stumbled on an interesting article, How to Make a Life Preserver from a Raincoat. And here's an important point. The weather in San Francisco Bay leaves much to be desired, mainly due to frequent downpours. Raincoats were an essential part of Alcatraz inmates' wardrobes, and not flimsy plastic bags with armholes. Inmate raincoats were made of sturdy, reliable material. Prison brass didn't keep strict inventory of this clothing item, so the accomplices easily used not just their own but borrow from other inmates. They managed to gather several dozen in total. And here's another key detail. Many inmates knew about the planned escape. Alcatraz cells face each other. Sawing through a wall for 6 months unnoticed is impossible. Yet none of the inmates ratted out the future fugitives to the guards. In that improvised sealing workshop, the fugitives make life preservers and an inflatable boat from the raincoats. Experience from sewing shops in various prisons comes in handy like never before. And though work conditions were far from ideal, the accomplices used thread, glue, and heat to make the vests and boat. They also craft oars from scavenged wood slats. 9 months after starting prep, Alan West, Frank Morris, and the Anglin brothers are ready to escape. The show begins. June 11th, 1962, 10 p.m. Lights out at Alcatraz. The next day at 7 a.m., the routine check starts. The accomplices have less than 10 hours to escape. At the very first stage, one inmate drops out, the very Alan West who came up with the vent escape idea. He stays in his cell. To this day, it's unclear what caused it. He claimed he overdid the cement on his fake wall plug. At the crucial moment, he just couldn't remove it. There's a theory he got scared. Logical enough. None of the 36 people who'd tried escaping Alcatraz before succeeded. Most were caught, 6 were killed, and a few more drowned. There's a third version. The accomplices ditched West. Why that might have happened and which version is true, still unknown. 3 fugitives remain, Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers. They climb out of their cells, make their way up to the vent, and push out the pre-sawed heavy grate onto the roof. According to several witnesses serving time at Alcatraz that night, they heard the sound of a heavy object hitting the roof. Then inmates started making noise on purpose to distract the guards. Whether this act of solidarity really happened or it's a nice legend, unclear to the end. What we know for sure is that the fugitives made it onto the building roof undetected. With them, folded life preservers, the boat, oars, and an accordion. The sharpest among you have already guessed what for. The rest will get it soon. Alcatraz took food seriously, so the first floor had a separate bakery. Its exhaust pipe ran to the top of the building. The inmates slide down that pipe. Despite the guard towers, the fugitives reach the barbed wire fence around the island unnoticed. The trio throws clothes over it and climbs over safely. Then they descend the northwest side of the island, and here the accordion comes into play. With it, they pump air into the boat and life preservers. Grabbing the oars, Frank Morris, John, and Clarence Anglin start rowing. Behind them lies America's most impenetrable prison. What happened at Alcatraz the morning after the escape, you already know. Stunned guards, alarm signal, dummy head. Prison management launches a search. Quickly becomes clear the fugitives aren't on the island. Then the FBI takes over. They bring in the Coast Guard and all nearby mainland police precincts. These moves say one thing. Authorities seriously consider the fugitives successfully crossed the bay and are on the run. Main evidence: the fugitive cells, their sealing workshop, and Alan West. In interrogations, he reveals details of the planned escape. Gradually, the picture emerges for FBI agents and prison brass. But it doesn't answer the main question. Where did Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers disappear to? Over 3 days post-escape, police find several clues. About 1 kilometer from Alcatraz, a bag with photos and notes turns up in the water. They belong to the Anglin brothers. Nearby, off Angel Island next to Alcatraz, they find N or matching the one left in the fugitives' roof workshop. And finally, 3 days later, on a beach far from Alcatraz, they discover a life preserver matching the one left with Alan West. Police visit all relatives and close acquaintances of the fugitives. All claim they haven't seen the inmates or received any messages. The Anglin brothers' mother told police she hadn't seen her sons. And if she had, she wouldn't tell them. Surveillance is set up on all the fugitives' relatives. It lasts nearly 20 years. In those years, investigators never locate any of the three. In 1979, the FBI closes the Alcatraz escape investigation. Over nearly 20 years, they meticulously recreate the accomplices' actions from a year before the escape and that June night in 1962. In short, they'll know almost everything I just told you. But the main question remains unanswered. What happened to the trio after shoving off from Alcatraz Island? Did they manage to cross San Francisco Bay, or did they drown? No bodies were found, and no one saw the inmates alive. FBI agents end the probe with a set of theories and assumptions, most of which raise questions. But let's go through them in order. The FBI website has a short article on the Alcatraz escape history. At the end, it lists several theories on why, in law enforcement's view, the fugitives couldn't reach land and drowned. The first and main argument: the fugitives physically couldn't swim the bay, sharks, currents, cold. On one hand, the version sounds logical. The fourth escapee, Alan West, claimed their target was Angel Island, a half-abandoned military base there. The fugitives supposedly planned to reach it first. Few soldiers on the island meant low chance of being spotted and turned over to police. From there, they planned to get to the mainland. Per investigators, that escape night went like this. Strong winds started blowing the fugitives toward the ocean, and at some point they realized they couldn't row to Angel Island. So they ditched everything and tried swimming there. But hypothermia quickly took its toll, and the exhausted fugitives drowned. This is backed by nearby finds: the photo bag and oar. Several details shatter this picture. First, the shark myth. One Alcatraz horror story was that the bay waters teemed with great whites. Great whites, from Jaws, the ones that love eating people, including humans. In reality, there are sharks in the bay, but their numbers are greatly exaggerated. And not great whites, species that don't care about people. For a fully objective picture, noted great white sightings in San Francisco Bay do exist, but over the last half-century, you could count them on one hand. Next myth: the bay's cold waters and strong currents. For decades, triathlon competitions have been held in these waters. One stage is a swim from Alcatraz Island to the mainland. Every year, dozens, if not hundreds, of participants swim those very cold, current-swept waters. Average bay water temp is about 12 to 15 degrees Celsius. Not warm, sure, but you can last a couple hours in it. By the way, in the last 40 years, no swimmer has been attacked by sharks. So theoretically, the fugitives could have reached the spot, including by swimming. But it's not that simple. Alcatraz showers had hot water, not to make the atmosphere cozier, but to prevent inmates' bodies from adapting to cold water. And there was no pool at Alcatraz either. One thing is crossing the bay by trained athletes in broad daylight under supervision. Another is unhardened fugitives in poor shape in the dead of night. Proof: an escape from Alcatraz 6 months later. In late 1962, an inmate named John Scott slipped out of the prison kitchen, ran to the water, and started rowing. He covered 2 kilometers to the San Francisco-Oakland Bridge. But he was so exhausted he collapsed unconscious on shore, where police nabbed him. Additional indirect proof the fugitives drowned. Over nearly 20 years of investigation and family surveillance, the FBI found no solid evidence the inmates were alive or had given any sign. But no bodies were found either, so the case couldn't be closed. By law, in 1979, responsibility shifted to the U.S. Marshals Service. That's the agency mainly tasked with fugitive hunts. Over the last 40 years, tons of new details on the Alcatraz escapees' fate have emerged. Some prove the inmates not only didn't drown but quietly left the country. And they succeeded with one small caveat. The strong current swept them toward the ocean, so instead of Angel Island, the host landed somewhere under the Golden Gate Bridge. Maybe that's exactly what happened to Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers that June night in 1962. After the investigation shifted from FBI to Marshals, a couple unexpected documents surfaced. The fugitives' official boat was never found, but those documents recorded that a homemade boat was indeed found on Angel Island Beach. Moreover, there were tracks of several people leading from it. The same document mentioned another curious fact. Right after the 1962 escape, police in nearby areas closely monitored car theft reports. The fugitives needed transport. Officially, no such thefts happened. But in those same docs about the found boat were notes on a missing car. Why these docs surfaced only 20 years after the FBI wrapped up, and why the boat wasn't listed as evidence, unclear. Though there's reason to doubt their authenticity. The missing doc story only pops up in one History Channel documentary. Other sources just cite that film. Plus, the very fact of finding the fugitives' boat on Angel Island is highly dubious. The strong current would have swept the inmates left toward the mainland, as Mythbusters proved. The Alcatraz escape story itself was huge in '62. Police got flooded with calls and tips claiming the fugitives were spotted here or there, but none panned out. Years later, the Marshals got an intriguing letter. The writer claimed a relative picked up the fugitives near San Francisco in '62 and ended up shooting them. The letter even gave exact coordinates where the bodies were buried. When police arrived and started digging, they found nothing. The fugitives' relatives, especially the Anglins, claimed over a long time they got letters and gifts from the vanished brothers. And supposedly the handwriting matched John and Clarence Anglin's. But no dates on the letters, so impossible to prove they were post-escape. Very possibly, the Anglin relatives just made up the letter story. In the mid-70s, this photo was taken in Brazil. The photographer claims it's the Anglin brothers. They supposedly escaped to South America and got a farm. Though some experts saw resemblances, the image quality doesn't allow certainty. Plus, the photographer was a guy named Britzy, a professional con man, so not the most reliable source. Like any unsolved mystery, it couldn't avoid conspiracy theories. Less than a year after the escape, Alcatraz prison closed. Its location made it too expensive to run. The whole escape was supposedly staged to justify the shutdown. So it's no surprise if authorities are hiding the fugitives even if their whereabouts are known. No solid proof in docs or witnesses for this theory. But its emergence makes sense. 60 years after the Alcatraz escape, neither the FBI nor the Marshals, let alone civilians, definitely know what went down that June night in 1962. There's one argument in this story that, in my view, is the weightiest. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers were career criminals. Each had multiple arrests. After getting out, they'd immediately commit a new crime and end up back in prison. For them, it was a second home. They simply didn't know how to live free. Agree it's hard to imagine the fugitives living a quiet farm life for 60 years without crossing paths with the FBI or police. Most likely, the inmates really drowned. But no bodies and no live fugitives found. By law, the Marshals must keep searching until the last one turns 100. That deadline is 2030. The Alcatraz escape story is full of contradictions. For every argument, there's an equally weighty counter. So many still believe Frank Morris, John, and Clarence Anglin crossed San Francisco Bay and vanished. At least many want to believe it,